NECO Health situation that we were touching on for Spotify
Yeah.
CEO. Daniel Ike's an investor in the situation where it sounds like a very interesting startup. I was very intrigued by that.
And it also coincides. He launched it roughly about the same time that he pulled out 100 million from Spotify. So I don't know what that means, but
I don't know what
you
that
could put
means.
you could put two and two together. Maybe he's
Yeah.
just sick of fighting the good fight, and he's like ready to channel
Let me
some
go
of that.
somewhere else.
Yeah, let me
Yeah.
build something. Let me stop getting punched in the face every day.
Yeah. Yeah. For
So
sure.
I like, and this makes sense. It seems like a super strong product. I haven't done it, but I think anytime you're trying to provide a premium service at an affordable price in the healthcare space, especially in America, you should be patted on the back. You know,
100%.
Mark Cuban's done it with finding discount. I don't
The
know exactly what he's
pharmacy.
done,
Yeah.
but he's done
Yeah.
some pharmaceutical play where he's gone direct to
Yeah.
consumer or something like that.
Yeah. He's basically cut out the middleman in markup for like the pharmacy direct website that he's built,
Yeah.
which is absolutely like staggeringly discounted rates. Like if some type of insulin or some type of medication would usually cost someone, anywhere from $600 to $1,000, he's literally cut it down to like $40. And
And is he
there's
just doing that for products outside of patent? Like as soon as they come outside of the pharmaceutical patent, he just like
I
creates a
believe
white
so.
labeled version of essentially.
I believe so. And I mean, there's so many different variations of these medicines that are just, as you said, they're white labeled, or there's generic names for them that people just go with the brand name of Xanax, but they're not familiar with all the other different variations of the generic brands that exist that do the same exact things, right? And there's basically a fee that's attached to it every time. I think it's like $5 or $10 that comes with every order that covers shipping and handling, etc. But they've basically cut out the middleman and all the marginalizations of what occurs in the pharmaceutical industry. Because when these companies in the US, they hold the patents or they hold the rights to it, they can charge whatever the hell they want for people that are actually in need of these medications. And what he's done with that is absolutely incredible, and is just a testament to his good grace, to be honest with you. Obviously, everything comes down to wanting to make it a successful business endeavor, but it's always what you touch on and say, when there's a big problem, there's a bigger solution at play. And he came up with an avenue for something that is absolutely revolutionizing the space. And I think the more that people become aware of it, I know some people personally that have completely switched their basis of obtaining the medicines that they need by going directly through Mark Cuban's service. So on the NECO Health basis, it's a whole new approach to how they want to do bioscanning. I think there's some proprietary technology that they're implementing that's non-invasive for them to be able to understand what your heart rate is, how that whole scope of things breaks down, like your hydration levels. It's basically like the Whoop and all these things on a glorified scale, just a whole different level. And essentially
but I think it's also
what it
like
is,
seeing if you're cancer prone and stuff like that, if things are
yeah,
forming inside of your body. That
yes,
stuff's and think about the value of that. Like $250, like you have Mark Cuban who's solving a drug problem, which is a post-diagnosis challenge. Like it's not preventative, it's a
no,
solution, right?
yeah,
And I think
absolutely,
the power of this is affording people the luxury of identifying the problem before it's too bad to solve. And I think
yeah,
that
absolutely,
that's a high value solution. That's like,
absolutely.
if you're catching it before someone even needs the medication,
Yeah, it's
that's
preventative in every sense of the word. The way it essentially works is you pay a couple $100. You go in there, I think in less than 20 minutes or something, they were saying what it was. You have a full body scan that occurs, and then they basically generalize and compare your bodily scores and your health scores against other people in your age range that are of optimal health to see how far off you are from those metrics. And then they're able to detect early signs of cancer, of other health issues, if you're pre-diabetic or whatever it might be. And if they're actually able to implement that and make it work, that's going to be one of the biggest businesses that we see come to fruition in a really long time, you know, because the
I
rate in
agree.
which AI companies are starting to actually be able to scale their products now, it's a riff off of what we touched on our last episode. The intersection is definitely fast approaching. Like OpenAI has now pushed their monthly revenue to between 240 to 280 million because so many individuals and businesses are now becoming reliant on the chat GPT services of the world. And with Soros and GPT-5 and all the other new scaling stuff that they're going to plan to implement, the crossroads is definitely coming. And it's something that I keep reiterating, that I think it's going to be the advancement of health based product and service that is really going
Yeah.
to revolutionize this space that we haven't seen yet. And it's honestly, it's exciting. It's a fruitful endeavor for humanity, and I think it's something that's going to pay off 100-fold. And I think once, as you were talking about, even a company like Apple, it seems as if that they're really becoming overly reliant on service-based offerings, because that
Mhm.
bottom line for them on the services on the month-to-month basis of what they're offering is really scaling at an exponential rate. How many iPhones can you realistically continue to sell? Right. I know they ramped up production for the iPhone 16, thinking that it was going to be one of their best selling ones in a few years because of the angle in which they've been able to sell the AI feature, but that's really just software. There's
Exactly. I think
no
that was my issue with the law.
hardware changes.
We can attack that topic, but I thought the launch was appalling. It was
Yeah.
like the rollout of that was terrible. Like they did the software launch and then they followed that up with the hardware launch. I looked at the Apple AirPod Maxes, whatever the hell they're called.
The big ones.
Nothing. They changed to they like same price
The,
point,
the yeah, it's just
just the
USB-C charging
just
now. Yeah,
USB C. Like I,
instead of Lightning.
if I was on
Yeah.
that product team, oh, like
Yeah,
the
like you think they would make them a little more convenient in the sense of how you can even collapse them maybe, or make them a little bit more
yeah,
portable
or
so it's
give
not
it an
like the
off
hard
button.
shelled.
Like I
Yeah.
just can't.
Yeah.
Like having it just sit there and burning through, and then like by the time I'm ready to go back to it again because I don't wear them that often, they're done.
Mhm.
Like it's
Yeah.
there's just so many product challenges that I just think Apple's not doing the the innovative work that they once were. They haven't even done
Mhm.
anything with AI. They've leveraged and
No.
borrowed AI. So
Mhm.
there's not really much original that they're doing anymore. And the one thing that they did original, they cut funding on in the Vision Pro. So
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
kind of like a little bit of a wet blanket of a rollout. And but
Mhm.
I do get it. I think they're a little bit like Google and search. Like
Mhm.
Google's not financially incentivized to move away from Google Ads. So
Mhm.
as a result, they don't want to move to AI, even though they've been the most equipped and they've created the most profound AI engine in YouTube. Um,
Mhm.
they don't want they don't want to move away from their cash cow. So
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
it stalls innovation because they're hoarding um, knowledge, and now they've got
Mhm.
a competitor sitting there in OpenAI that's just able to raise whatever amount of money they wish to. So
Absolutely. It's an
like
open
you've now
checkbook.
got a legitimate competitor, but they're still in this like race that they can't run. Like they're running a 100-meter sprint, but they can't go full
Mhm.
pace because
Mhm.
they kind of want the slower time so they can continue the
Mhm.
revenue structure that they've currently got. And I think Apple's in a little bit of a similar position where it's the most successful luxury brand ever created ever, full stop. It's
Absolutely.
I don't view it as a tech company. I view it as a luxury brand. If I see
Mhm.
someone with an Apple, I feel some kind of way about them as opposed to a Dell.
100%.
like,
Or an
like there's a
Android or whatever. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
It's and that's the definition of luxury. You know, they
Mhm.
have that stamp of approval and they have maintained that for such a long period of time. And I fear for them as as the ability to create hardware and software as the ability for software to become more and more valuable.
Mhm.
All you got to do is plug that into existing hardware and
Mhm.
you've got a superior product.
Yeah. Have you
Because the
had a
less
chance to
they
utilize the Apple AI? Have you used it yet or
No,
no?
I haven't used it yet.
Okay, I've been a part of the beta for a couple months now, since like end
How is it?
of June, early July. Um, it's a little bit of a letdown. Like you can double tap on the bottom of the screen to ask Siri a question if you're like in a public setting and you don't want to speak out loud and say something. And the whole interface of Siri is completely different now. And there's certain utilization in places like I don't really care about like generating my own emojis. Like that's cool
or
for maybe a
searching
14-year-old kid or,
images.
yeah, like that could be useful in a certain sense if I could be like, I could mention my wife and I's name and be like, when we were in front of this specific thing wearing this, and they'll find the exact picture that I'm trying to reference. But like most of your favorite moments are already marked in your literal favorites album. So like it's not
Or you
necessary. It's
posted them
very few and
somewhere.
far between. Yeah. So you're aware of how to get back to it or the relative date. So like I guess that like maybe they shave a couple seconds off of a situation that might make it a little bit more streamlined. But I find myself continuously swiping back over to ChatGPT, even though it's an extra step of getting back over to a different interface and a different app. It's one of those things where Apple's like their proofreading is good in a sense. Like any text that you write, you could just highlight it. And then there's like this little rainbow looking button to the right of it that you tap, and then it'll say make it more professional, make it more friendly, make it more like proofread it, whatever you want to do. And certain aspects of that are cool, but it's nowhere near the language model that ChatGPT has built. Nowhere near. Like it's 100% the poor man's version of it. And I know that they plan on implementing ChatGPT, but basically it's one of those things, excuse me, where ChatGPT already offers their premium service to members for a $19.99 monthly subscription fee. And you're so used to the interface and being able to have that back and forth dialogue, so to say, that I don't know. We'll see. The verdict is out still. I'm not impressed.
There's just so many other, like I've just swapped over all of our automations from ChatGPT to Claude 3.5, and it is so much better at communication. Like conversion rates on automated customer service tickets, stuff, all that kind of stuff is like, we're talking like 40% uplift in happy outcomes. Like it's significantly different. And I think that's a
what
whole
is
other
what is
model.
Claude 3.5 for those who don't know? What
Claude is created. It's in terms of usability, it's almost exactly the same as ChatGPT, missing a couple of functions in terms of like voice. You can't talk to it. It doesn't have access to the internet, but its data set is so much bigger, and its ability to collate long scripts and really, really long tone of voice documents. Like, for example, we could put every single transcript from our podcast in there and it could talk as us. Like,
Jesus.
Yeah, it's because it can hold such a large data set that it can take like we're talking 25 hours of transcript, and it could collate everything. Know who you are, know who I am. So there's a lot of stuff
instantaneously. It does it instantaneously.
Almost. And then you just refine it. Like for what we're working on right now, I'm using it to create. I've done it on both, and its ability to get the tone of voice created for us for what we want to do way significantly more accurate and what I'm
that's crazy
for. And
that's crazy
like, and ChatGPT 4 is already good, but this is in terms of communication, in terms of like data analytics, ChatGPT still has a beat, but like I wouldn't use it to analyze royalty statements yet. It's a little bit less accurate, but it's run by a company called Anthropic, and they are in some cases best in class. Yeah, like it's an arms race right now, and everyone's better at something at some time. It's like this constant ebb and flow, and like ChatGPT is working on some new strawberry product that's coming, and like they're just
that's more adept at coding interface and whatnot. Yeah, because they want to try and lean it from consumer to corporate a little bit more. That's their intention.
And what I showed you the other day, that calculator that I created, that was done, epic. I'm not kidding you, 6 minutes.
Damn.
Like it generates the code. I go back and say, I need you to change the design. I want it to represent more like this, put reference image, exact down to color code, like hex color codes.
Wow.
and coming back and referencing it to a Pantone color and making sure that the color was correct. Like it's
Oh my
very, very
God.
strong, very strong.
Wow.
So like that arms race is going to keep moving, and I love what Apple did conceptually of like not entering the race but monetizing off the race that's already happening and an unlimited
Mm-hmm.
bottomless pit of money that all of those companies can provide to Apple for access and
Mm-hmm.
do exactly the same thing they did with Google and in Safari search as the default search browser. But
Mm-hmm.
I think governments are just getting way more sophisticated on customer data and manipulation of those large companies, and I think
Oh
it's
yeah.
it's just like it's going
The
to get harder and harder for
antitrust
those.
stuff is getting
Yeah,
serious. Yeah.
it's
I
just going
mean,
to get harder and
I don't think
harder.
people I don't think most people are even aware of the fact that Apple is Google's largest payout annually. What they pay in
Yeah.
royalty to Apple for being the default search engine. Um, I think last I checked, it was creeping on 20 billion annually
Yep.
that they pay out
Yep.
Apple, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it was like 16 and a half, 17 billion that they pay Apple
It's
annually, which is pretty crazy, when you think about it.
but it
And now
also
there's
but it also
conversations.
goes to show that that's what happens when you partner with a luxury product.
100%.
You know,
And then people
Apple's
become
just as much of a
dependent on
fashion
that.
accessory as it is a piece of technology.
Of course.
It's mastered that, and I
Absolutely.
respect it. I just want to see where it goes. I just believe in excellence. I think if you're in that space and that's who you are, you gotta fall on your sword every single time you launch to try and constantly outdo yourself. And I just don't
Hmm.
feel like this round they did that. I feel like it's like getting to a
Hmm.
stage where people are going to start getting every second or third phone because
100%. Well,
it's
that's
not
what it's
worth
already
giving
become
everyone.
for. I think we're already seeing that, like myself included. I went from being an annual iPhone upgrade to where after I got the 10X or the X, the iPhone 10, which I really thought was the last great reinvention of the iPhone, right? Like Apple really delivered properly, in my opinion, with the X when they went for the all glass panel and everything just felt like processing wise and RAM wise, it was upgraded. I stopped purchasing the year over year upgrades. Then I got like the 13. Then after the 13, I skipped the 14. I got the 15.
Yeah,
Like I think the 15 will hold me over now until probably the 17. Like I don't, it's what do you need it for at this point? It's just such incremental upgrades that like, okay, like now I can zoom in another 20 meters. Do you know what I mean? Like, what am
yeah,
I ever going to
exactly.
use that for? You know,
100%.
it's like one of those things where now you see the vultures starting to circle in the sense of the conversations that are opening up with Apple and Microsoft wanting to make deeper investments into open AI and get major positions, make where equity stake acquisitions, where I'm very curious to see how this plays out. And what we were talking about in the early part of this episode, where you were mentioning that Apple is slowly becoming a health company. Where do you think that this goes from here? Do you think that they try and implement, like, what is this going to do for the mental health aspect? Like, we talk about the advancements for the biological benefits, maybe what medication or implementations might happen, the NECO services of bodily scans and whatnot. But I'm very curious to see how this develops in the sense of a mental health aspect. Like, is it going to be some type of interface of psychiatric basis that occurs or something that, from conversation or voice? Like, I know that certain services, like even OpenAI's voice chat, like it can
Yeah.
notice when you're actually sounding a little more sad or defeated or fatigued. And like, how is that going to evolve? I'm curious to hear your opinion about where you think that's going to go.
I think it's really interesting. I think Apple's in an interesting position right now, and I think it's waiting for a legal battle to finish before it gets going on its next evolution of the company. I think it's sitting
Hmm.
in a position right now where it's taking 30% of every single dollar spent on the App Store. So
Hmm. Hmm.
even when you go and boost your ads and you
Oh
use
my
the
God, I
boost
was going to talk to you
function
about this. Yeah. Now
inside
they
of
have the
that,
fee built in on top.
yeah, they charge you. They're clearing 30% on that. So
Yeah.
every single time you use the App Store, it's clearing 30%. So that's going to hit an antitrust brick wall, and it's already being lobbied like crazy right now. And they're just
Hmm.
going to keep collecting that revenue until they can't anymore. And the minute they
Hmm.
can't is the minute they start giving the big fuck you to
Hmm.
TikTok, Instagram, all those
Meta.
platforms. So what
Hmm.
they're going to start to do is become a better for you product,
Hmm.
and they're going to create a dumb phone So
Mm-hmm.
they're going to create a barely connected to the internet, only your essential apps necessary. It'll create a
Mm-hmm.
dumb phone and it'll sell it for a mental health gain. It'll pair
Mm-hmm.
with an Apple Watch that will tell you and track your mood, your energy, everything that's going on in your life, and it will start to almost take you offline.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
because it's
interesting.
no longer monetizing from being online. So
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna I just got the Beats clear headphones. Apple owns
Wow,
this
those look
company.
sick. Mm-hmm.
So Apple owns these, and when I put it into my phone and connected it, it connected exactly the same as an Apple as AirPods. It did the same
Pops
like
up.
swirly
Mm-hmm.
popped up thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then it does the same thing when you put it in your ear and it talks to you when you get a new message come in on WhatsApp or any other app. It'll read the message out to me if I want it to. I think that's where it's going to go. I think
Mm-hmm.
they're going to, when the screen stops being monetizable the way it is now,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to start to make the screen less important. Right
Mm-hmm.
now, last I checked, AirPods is a $13 billion business.
Mm-hmm.
Just AirPods.
Mm-hmm.
Like, once that starts to scale, the notion of audio and the notion of improving the technology around what
Mm-hmm.
is in your ear or on your head
Mm-hmm.
is very interesting.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
might have been 12 billion. Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm
Might
curious
need to
because
go check.
I know they're 200 billion annual revenue. I know AirPods and whatnot make up a huge portion of that now. Yeah,
Like, and you're
you're
now
dead on. You're dead on. It's
like,
14 and a half.
so like you're sitting there and you're looking at it going, okay, they're not innovating around the phone anymore because they know they're probably going to lose the monetization leverage that they hold on top of the hardware. So the software that
Mm-hmm.
they're making, and also the ability for everyone to create apps and for them to monetize off it. So they'll now start to pare back from that, and they'll go,
Mm-hmm.
okay, now we create hardware.
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially our core function. So let's
Mm-hmm.
turn ourselves into a health-based product. Let's
Mm-hmm.
tell you when you've been sitting at your computer too long that you should stand up, go
Mm-hmm.
for a walk. Let's tell
Mm-hmm.
you the benefits of going for a walk. Let's
Mm-hmm.
dumb the phone down and really piss off the people that we despise.
Mm-hmm.
Get them off TikTok for 14 hours a day. Start to offer you health benefits and rewards for spending less time on social media, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're going to figure out different forms of partnerships. Maybe they start working with insurance companies. Maybe they
Mm-hmm.
start leveraging that and selling the data.
Maybe they become their own insurance company.
Maybe they become their own. They've already become their own payment system. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, you start leveraging yourself into an insurance lane and you start insuring people based on their current health status. You improve your health score by spending less time on social media, by
Mm-hmm.
exercising more, by getting discounts on membership, whatever it ends up becoming. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's this meeting of the worlds right now, and there's a collection of macro things taking place. I have never
Mm-hmm.
seen such an influx of biohacking. It's like you've
Absolutely.
got companies like Whoop worth billions of dollars, and they're giving you boring data. Like, who would have
Mm-hmm.
cared about that 10 years ago? No one would have
Mm-hmm.
cared what their BPM was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no one would have cared what their like. It was not as relevant. And now you've got ice baths, saunas, health clubs that people are paying 50 grand
Mm-hmm.
a month, 50 grand a
Mm-hmm.
year to join because they've got
Mm-hmm.
cryo chambers and all kinds of crazy stuff inside them. And so you've got this
Mm-hmm.
like this bringing down the barrier of excellent levels of health, combining
Mm-hmm.
that with the floor of like what you can do with this and what you can do on
Mm-hmm.
these. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's all going to meet in the middle.
I
And
wholeheartedly agree.
I think the emphasis on social media is going to start to decline because I
Mm-hmm.
think it's going to become like smoking.
Mm-hmm.
Like, your screen time
So well said.
is going to be a reflection of the caliber of person that you are,
100%. I couldn't agree
you
more.
know?
It's one of those
And
things where you already see it happening. Like the hustle culture, the mentality of even a decade ago, it was grind, 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 and sleep is for the weak, and you gotta hustle 20 hours a day if you really want to be like that guy or that girl and really make it happen. And now it's the complete opposite. You see the trend that's starting to emerge even amongst the youth of trying to get the ultimate sleep scores, or companies like 8 Sleep that introduce 3,000, 4,000 $1,000 devices that people are willing to shell out and purchase, because even if they can optimize an extra 30 minutes of good effective sleep throughout the night, people are doing anything that they can to implement it. And you see all these different lanes of biohacking and what people are trying to approach, even in the sense of holistic medicine that we've talked about. People are really focusing on outwardly experiences to help summarize thought patterns to deal with, PTSD, and a lot of compelling evidence in science and university studies will tell you that they're actually quite effective in
Yeah.
how resourceful they can actually be and beneficial that they could be to people. So it's a very interesting topic of conversation. I've had personal experiences myself that have been some of the most profound experiences for me that I've ever had, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's I think it's all culminating in the next evolution of us.
Mm-hmm.
We've whenever you introduce technology to of any form of technology, could be weaponry back before the internet, and it was just an
Mm-hmm.
axe.
Mm-hmm.
When people first held an axe, it was probably used to kill someone before it was used for like we
Mm-hmm.
create technology, we use it badly, and then we
Mm-hmm.
deploy it for growth. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of dumb that way. And I think the
Mm-hmm.
same thing just happened with the internet. We launched it, we focused on .coms and we focused on shitty websites, and then we
Mm-hmm.
evolved, and then we got obsessed with it and deeply obsessed with it. And I think we're just gonna get to a point where we start paring it back. And I think
100%.
to layer it back to the other topic of psychedelics and things like that, there's a superpower in that really starts to teach you have to pare back that tech, you know,
100%.
and it like starts to
Absolutely.
screw like in
Of
an
course.
uncomfortable way. It shares that message with you, you
It's
know.
not base reality. It's not the real manner in which we're conditioned to exist. It's one of those things, it's like, to touch on your point here before we go into that conversation, it's like humans as a whole, as a species, we're bright in a lot of ways, and we're not the brightest in many others, right? It's like, the infrastructure in which humanity needs to be structured, comparative to how animal instinct kicks in when you recognize these patterns in nature. Like, it takes us years on end to be able to learn how to walk and speak when animals come out the womb flying, right? Well aware of how to navigate their landscape and their world. And humans require such an infrastructure comparative to recognizing rural children who have been born and raised outside of the systematic approach, in the sense of, we require the education to develop language, to learn how to read and write. And it takes decades on end to be able to actually implement that in a constructive manner, to be a contributing member of society, for you to recognize how to develop your skills, what habits that need to come about, how to learn how to speak, as I'm mentioning, all the above that comes with it. And that's just a small foresight into recognizing the actual limitations of most of the human race, right? Like, if you even take your axe theory, and if me and you were thrown into the woods with an axe and a shovel, how long before we send an email, brother? You understand?
Yeah,
Like, it's gonna take us a very long time, if ever, most likely never, to understand how to even implement the basis of that technology, let alone a derivative of electricity or whatever it might be. That all comes from the source that is the planet, that is Mother Nature herself, right? This is all created from what material was given to us, the God-given materials that surround us all. And when you foray and you have those psychedelic experiences, it strips away all of that, and it helps you recognize how conditioned your subconscious and your thoughts have actually become by societal boundaries. And I always talk about, the fire truck for him, the Barbie doll for her philosophy.
mm,
And you do not recognize over time, whether you're a teenager, whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, how much society has actually conditioned your way of thinking. And the psychedelic experiences that I've had, the most profound, wholeheartedly being 5-MeO DMT, strips away all of that. And it takes you to a place of where you have a process of your train of thought prior to all of that bias that presents itself in your
Mm.
life. So when you start to have these reflections, at least for me personally, because the experience is going to be different for everyone. And I know you and I even have had vastly different experiences with it. But for me personally, it took me back to a place, quote unquote, that
Mm.
it stripped away all of those conditions. And I had a foresight of life and myself and my spirit without any of those biases that were introduced from what I thought I was. You understand what I'm trying to say to you?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
stripped me back to such a vulnerable place of recognizing that, you know, happiness is not a destination. It's a constant that you have to implement for yourself. These state of minds of anxiety and depression, although very real, is a force brought onto self. And the state of mind can be evolved and pushed through and recognized as something inherent that isn't even real, to be quite frank. And I know it might sound like hyperboil to a lot of people that are listening that may not have had the personal experiences that I have had, but they have been some of the most profound and prolific experiences of my life, and definitely shaped my basis and understanding of spirituality, and recognizing that there's a prior, a now, and an after that I believe in a spiritual sense. And
Mhm.
it's very eye-opening. It's a very eye-opening experience.
I agree. I think my experience was heavily centered around my concept of time and how I'd chosen throughout my life to bury or ignore certain things, and
Mhm.
um, it forced me to address those things. It
Mhm.
brought them to the forefront in a multitude of uncomfortable delivery mechanisms that
Mhm.
made it undeniable that those things had to be addressed, um,
Mhm.
because of the ways that it was washed over me, removed, allowed me to feel a sense of comfort, and then brought right back in another equally horrific way. And
Mhm.
I think that everyone that I've spoken to that's had experiences in this world has said that the delivery of the messaging is curated to how you need to feel or see it. You know, some people have these euphoric experiences that are impeccably amazing, and that's because that's the delivery that they best warm to. You know, I don't think that's my best delivery because that's not what I got. Um,
Mhm.
and I think that that's also a metaphor for life. You know,
Mhm.
there's kids when they're young, like they can be told not to touch the stove, but they don't care till they touch it. They don't care till they
And they
feel it,
burn. Mhm.
and they burn, and that they
Mhm.
have to feel that, they have to go through that. And I think it's a microcosm of that. And
Mhm.
I I think there's real power to it. I think, you know, you just got to be ready for it. Especially there's obviously levels to what you choose to do,
Mhm.
but I think it's definitely a powerful tool when used correctly with the right guidance and the right assistance. And I think that's
Oof.
the most common mistake that I see is
Wow.
someone who meets with someone who identifies as a shaman but acts as an idiot. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
the label is not what you're chasing; it's the skill set that they hold, and
Absolutely,
going
brother.
and
That's so
experiencing
well
this with the
said.
right people, because it's some
Setting is everything.
intense experiences, and
Well, it's out of
like
body, so it
it's out of
absolutely
body, and
is.
it's definitely an interesting one. And I think I support it. I believe in it, especially if you have PTSD or um, severe mental hurdles that you need to find unblocks for, and maybe
Mhm.
you've built up such a resistance and such a barrier to, and a hardened shell that you just can't crack through.
Mhm.
Psychedelics will assist you with that. You know, it
Mhm.
will
Mhm.
soften that shell enough for you to be able to play with. Maybe soften
Mhm.
it too much for you to handle, but
Mhm.
it's like it's a powerful tool. And I think when combined with an holistic view of health, I think it's
Mhm.
very very powerful. But I think
Yeah.
there has to be a holistic view on health, because when I did my experience, the hardest part was the build up, the 3 weeks before, eating the right foods, making sure that
Mm-hmm.
my body was ready
Mm-hmm.
for it. And even then, it was a form of torture that I wouldn't wish upon anyone until it was amazing. But it was
Mm-hmm.
tough, and I think
You know,
that
it's interesting. It's very interesting. It's you had the NN-DMT experience, which was ayahuasca. So
yes,
your experience is NN-DMT, which is found in plants and reoccurring in nature. And the other side of DMT is 5-MeO-DMT, which comes from the
yeah,
Colorado river toad, also known as the Sonoran desert toad. And the desert toad secretes a venom from its glands that is captured, dried, and then vaporized and inhaled for the DMT experience. And your DMT experience, you drank it, correct?
yes, bark,
Okay,
yeah,
so this is really
horrible taste.
interesting because, oh, the worst I've heard. But in the
Oh, ugh.
conversations that I've had, everybody that has had that I know personally, the 5 or 6 people that I've spoken to that have had the 5-MeO DMT experience that comes from the toad. And I also know a good handful of people, including a couple family members close to me, who have done the NN DMT ayahuasca experience. Everybody that speaks to me about the NN ayahuasca experience, the plant-based experience, tells me that it's exactly what you're saying, that it's way more intense, that it's like a intense ego death. It's a purge. There's vomiting involved a lot of time, purging of stuff. It's very deep and a chaotic experience sometimes, but then like the come down and the breakthrough is definitely a triumphant moment. And the
Yeah,
people that I've talked to about the
you
five
work for it.
meo yeah, the 5-MeO
Yeah,
DMT side of things, it's like, when I can touch on my own personal experience and we can wind down around this part of the conversation, is my 5-MeO DMT experience. I basically was with an incredible shaman who had prepped me from months prior. We had a one-on-one conversation, and he wanted to have an exchange of energy, as he called it, to recognize if he was even the right guide for me. So you could understand that it wasn't a monetary incentive, because afterwards, and even me trying to refer a couple people to him, he told me that the energy wasn't right. He didn't feel the alignment. His intuition was telling him that he wasn't the guide for them, and that they had more work to do before he was able to help them in any type of holistic basis, right? So basically, I went and stayed in some secluded place. I don't want to make mention of anything. And I was there for a couple nights, ate the right food, went on some incredible hiking experiences, got my mind ready for it. And with the rising sun, I was introduced to the medicine. And it's one of those things where you inhale the medicine heavily, right? You hold it for as long as you can. And the minute that you exhale, it's almost as if like you start to experience this fragmented pixelation of reality. And it's almost like the fractals that you are unaware of start to break away. Okay. And
hmm
it's like this bubbling melting of the room that happens, and everything kind of just purges away. And the way I described it is you literally blast off into the cosmos. Like you go straight
yeah,
into the
wow.
center of whatever you believe is an experience with your creator, the beginning of time, whatever it is. The most profound part of the experience to me was that when I blasted off, so to say, it felt so incredibly familiar to me. It wasn't a place that I was scared of. I had no anxiety being in what was like a cosmic reflection. It literally looked like I was traveling through the stars. And it felt so incredibly familiar to my spirit that the only conclusion that I could have to take away from that was that I had been there before. Whether it was in a spiritual realm, whether it was the place of creation or the place that I personally had come from, whatever it is, however you want to interpret it for yourself, it was so unbelievably familiar that it felt like I was experiencing a lifetime in this place all over again. And certain emotions would pop up, certain images of my mother, certain things that I was going through that you would recognize was so obsolete and so inefficient to your actual structure of existence that it means nothing to you. You understand? And it helped me get over these certain hurdles that I was
Mhm.
experiencing. It was the venture into my sobriety, the early parts of my sobriety with the experiences, and it reinforced how crucial that actually was to me. And you almost recognize that you're exactly where you're meant to be and everything is in perfect alignment for you, even when you don't think it is, right?
Yeah.
And after what felt like what could have been like years of this experience with no measure of time for me at all, I could have stayed there forever if it was necessary. It was such an incredibly warm and encompassing, euphoric feeling that when I came back to, and everything kind of came back to me in the sense of the room I was in. And I recognized that I was holding on to the shaman's hands without even being aware of doing
Yeah.
such, right? He was shocked that I was even able to sit upright through the whole situation, because most of the time people fall back, they have to
Yeah.
put their head on a pillow, they're breathing heavily. And I guess I had sat upright through the whole situation, which I guess was, kind of oddly strange in itself. But when I came back to, I had such an overwhelming sense of grounding and gratitude for the reality that we consciously get to experience. And you recognizing that inherently we're just a field of energy that dances amongst itself. And the interpretation that we get to experience of this shared conscious experience is such a magical dynamic on the day to day that it really helps emphasize your need to maximize every day and just revolve in an abundance of gratitude, and recognize that for my personal belief, there was a prior, there is now, and there is an after. And you have to take all these experiences as the most gracious and magical experiences that you could interpret. And the fact that we consciously get to live this reflection of reality and life is the greatest blessing above all. Birth is the greatest blessing above all. Everything after that is just the cherry on top. And
Yeah.
it really, really helped emphasize the mantra of you have to constantly ground yourself in gratitude. That's what invites the abundance. You have to believe that you're worthy of it. And I don't know, man. It was quite a fascinating experience for me, you know?
I think one thing that you said through that I think struck a nerve on my end was the feeling of being there before. And I think
Mhm.
that there's a really interesting thought exercise around that. Like when you watch like penguins, or when you watch turtles when they get born
Mhm.
and they know exactly what to do, and they they
Mhm.
they craft their path to the water and they know that's where they need
Wow.
to be. And I
Mhm.
think there's like, as intellectual beings that have the capacity for deep thought and superior self manipulation,
Mhm.
we maybe there is this need to embark on these journeys, these spiritual journeys, in order to tap into that version of ourselves that needs to find the water, to use the turtle analogy. You know,
Mhm.
there's that sort
That's
of,
great.
but we may not be able to access that without assistance. And that's why
Mhm.
these things and that's why these drugs exist,
Mhm.
for us
Mhm.
to properly access the capabilities that we have for ourselves, and
Mhm.
the levels of superiority that we can achieve. And I think there's
Mhm.
like an interesting thought exercise around that. Nothing proven, but
Mhm.
definitely this, because it's not the first time I've heard that notion of like being on, like, at the end of the day, it's very weird that there is crossover in experiences. Even when they do controlled studies, the
Mhm.
objects people see, the
Mhm. Are very
experiences people
familiar.
have
Yeah.
are
Very
very
similar.
similar, even when done in controlled
Mhm.
study. And
100%.
there's that can't be a coincidence. That
Mhm.
it could, there is a chance that could be alternate realities that are being tapped
Mhm.
into, that are
Mhm.
screaming to communicate with us. And
Mhm.
the further
Mhm.
away you are from that version of yourself, the louder the drug has to scream,
Mhm.
you know,
So well said.
because you've developed so many barriers to that version of you that
Mhm.
you've got to overcome. And
Mhm.
I think we do this every day. We create
Mhm.
resistance and we manipulate ourselves into believing that we're in a better place than we are, or we're in a worse place than we are, or whatever.
Mhm.
We our self talk with ourselves is some of the most toxic communication that we hold on a daily basis. And
Mhm.
if you're doing that for extended periods of time, you may have to unlock that. Like you may have to assist yourself in getting out of your own way, because that it's
Absolutely.
an interesting thought. It's just popped into my head
Yeah,
when you were talking.
it's aligning with your higher self. I think you just so beautifully articulated that, that it's a perfect place to round off on, to be honest with you, because that is that needs to be reiterated to self constantly every day. We're our own worst enemies, and we allow most of our thoughts to control ourselves and try and be in control of it. When the best analogy is like, if your thoughts are like a freeway lane, and they're the thoughts, if your mind is like a freeway and the thoughts are constant cars coming at you, instead of trying to continuously dodge these cars, you just have to learn to jump in the passenger seat of one of them and just go. Let the flow of thought just occur naturally, and recognize that you are not in control, but at the same time your thoughts do not control you. And the greatest experiences and takeaways that I've had from these psychedelic endeavors is recognizing that there is a higher self, and that intuition and voice that you hear when you have that gut instinct is a spirit guide of sorts, whatever you may want to personally believe. And I'm very curious to see where this all evolves to. And if in 20 years from now, there's a greater understanding of what we're touching on here, of supposed ulterior realities or whatever it might be. Because I know even with the NNDMT experience, there's journals of people who have never even communicated with each other, have been aware that they all refer to seeing some Amazonian type woman that occurs, and the messaging that they receive and whatnot, which is very, very interesting to me. And, you know, just ultimately the summary of things is that there is more of a broad-minded approach that we all just have to be open to interpretation of something greater than ourselves that could be there. And the exploration of such is definitely worthy, and something that I think is definitely worthy. And if people have the time, just Google 5 MEO DMT. Just that word right there, five, the number 5 MEO DMT, and look what comes up. It's the top headlines on the Google search results are how it's the most effective psychedelic drug that has been studied in the Cornell universities and a whole different bunch of institutions, professional reports of how effective it's been for curing and treating the anxiety and depression of people. This personal shaman that I had worked with has had over 400 different sessions, and he has almost 100% effective cure rate or healing rate of getting people off of substances. So there's people who have been abusing alcohol and drugs for decades on end, some 20 plus years, some actual famous individuals that I obviously can't name, but he has had almost 100% effective rate of, after one or two medicinal sessions, they never go back to it ever again. And the
Yeah,
relapse
it's
rate is
crazy.
next to zero. So it has to mean something, you know?
It has to. It has to. But I think that's down to a quality thing. And I think there's another person to check out,
Mm-hmm.
Aubrey Marcus.
Mm-hmm.
He's the person that I was listening to a lot before my experiences. And
Mm-hmm.
he was a big figure in that. He wrote a book recently called "Owning the Day," I think it's called. That's also
Mm-hmm.
that's actually a good book too. But
Mm-hmm.
he's been on the Joe Rogan podcast a bunch in the early days. He founded
Mm-hmm.
onnit.com, ONNIT. It's a human
Mm-hmm.
optimization supplement platform. Really, 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 really switched on guy. He works with a lot of athletes and stuff on mental health and using um, medicines to support with framing of success and visualization. He's a very, very powerful human being.
Mm-hmm.
So he's someone to check out if you're exploring this. He's just got a very analytical approach in a way to
Mm-hmm.
attacking things. Andrew Huberman also as well
Legend.
touches on this
Mm-hmm.
in some pockets. So I think that's the thing. And I think the last thing from my end on the sort of tapping in to things, I think everybody has different levels of resistance to this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
when I say resistance, like for example, for myself, I have to work very, very hard to not overthink. I don't stop thinking, like
Mm-hmm.
ever. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous. I'm always conjuring up some other future possibility, and
Oh my
I'm
God, yes.
crafting different versions of reality, and I'm
Hmm.
thinking about type fonts for brands, and I'm all over the place. So I have to
Hmm.
actively work on ensuring that my gut decisions are actually my gut, not what
Hmm.
I think is my gut. My
Hmm.
wife, on the other hand, I never question her gut. She
Hmm.
is
She's a woman.
so fucking in tune with what is going on in the cosmos
She's a
and just
woman, man.
trusts
Yeah.
it. And it's like nothing I've ever seen. So like some
Bro.
people have a natural inclination and tap into that, and other people have to actively cut through the layers of bullshit that we craft for ourselves to get to where
Hmm.
we want to go. And
Hmm.
I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions I feel with manifestation and people saying trust your gut. Often
Hmm.
it's not really your gut, it's what you think is your gut because you just
Hmm.
haven't done enough work to like
It, you have
dig
a
down to it,
preconceived
you know?
notion regarding it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Two things to wrap up on here. Two final quick little notes is one, a woman's intuition is far and away one of the most magical things that exists. Okay.
Profound.
They have a godlike, well, they literally nurture and carry the creation of life within them. And yes, it's a 50-50 pairing. Of course, you need male and female XY to make it happen. But
There's a
women's
difference
intuition is
between caring for it and shooting it. Like guys
exactly
are just making life. But
exactly. You're one
yeah,
shot and you're out, but a woman nurtures and carries that
100%.
for 9 months. And the godlike connection that occurs in them, I truly believe they have some inherent ability of a little bit of a different frequency and a little bit of a different antenna that women carry, because a woman's intuition is the most powerful and terrifying thing ever. And if you really are aware of your woman's intuition, it'll keep your ass in check in a lot of ways, in more ways than one, because they just know. They have this sensory ability to just know shit. Like it's like some
Yeah.
telekinetic basis of understanding shit. And two, the last point to touch on is one thing you just mentioned about yourself personally, where you say you always overthink and you're always doing this and you're always scaling. I recognize that in you as a superpower. So the way that I
I agree. I
interpret
don't
that from
dislike it about
yourself
myself. I'm very
wholeheartedly.
happy with it, but I just have to work against it sometimes.
Absolutely. But you
Yeah.
shouldn't be in your final form as a 30 something year old male. Like tomorrow shouldn't be the peak of your life. You understand? It should be a continuous
Facts. Yeah.
evolution of self and a continuous evolution of experience. So, like, if 60-year-old Dan, God on, knock on wood, God willing, we're having these conversations, I know it's going to be in a completely different light. You understand? So you're
100%.
still
100.
continuing
Yeah.
to hone the basis of what is a very short conscious experience in the scale of the universe's timeline. So I recognize that in you as my counterpoint in this equation, as the best co-host in the world, by the way.
Oh, fuck. I was
It's
about to cut you off and do that.
it's
I was just
it's
waiting for you to stop talking. So.
it's 100% a superpower. So I think for whoever might be interpreting this episode and listening, recognize that what you're often most insecure about or most conscious of is more oftentimes than not your superpower and what separates you from the bunch. You just have to hone that skill, continue to reemphasize what you want from it, and the derivatives will be nothing short of spectacular, you know? So I appreciate you sharing those
Yeah.
personal experiences.
But violent agreement. I could not agree more, especially on the co-host thing. But no, we're very. I think also the other thing too is, ensuring that you just have checks and balances with the people in your world. And
Hmm.
one last thing, and I think we'll touch on this on a future episode because I think it's also important to exist at the front of an episode, not just the back. But
Hmm.
I had a conversation with a good friend of mine the other day, and we were just talking about the stigma around male friendship and around
Hmm.
how it's kind of
Hmm.
corny sometimes to say I've got a best friend. It's different for
Hmm.
guys, and one
Hmm.
of the filters and layers that he uses to identify the closeness of a relationship is how little filter you have when you're around certain people,
Hmm.
and men acknowledging and going and auditing your friends group and identifying how much you stop yourself when you're around your
Hmm.
friends.
Wow.
And if that is ever flowing and you don't feel like you have to monitor who you are, and shift and evolve who you are to fit in, then that's a close friend. That's a low
Wow.
filter friend,
Wow.
right? And it just helped frame for me the people around me. You know, who do I spend time with because I enjoy spending time with, but I have to
Mm-hmm.
audit myself a lot, and then
Mm-hmm.
because that's tiring and exhausting, and something that I can't do for long. So, like, who are those people in my world? And I think it was just a very like a light bulb moment for me, and
I love
I
that.
think that's why I think this podcast is so fun to do, because I know with you, and I think vice versa, there is very minimal filter between the two of us. So as a
Wholeheartedly.
result, I think that means the conversation that people get to listen in on
Mm-hmm.
holds an element of vulnerability, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a
Mm-hmm.
there's a fun side to that. So
Yeah,
that's
and a
exactly
strength in
why
that.
I'm going to say that you're the best co-host in the game.
God bless you, man. I'll give you
And I
this
look
one.
forward to many more.
Absolutely, brother. I appreciate you always. And that's definitely going to be at the forefront of the next episode. And over the next coming weeks, we'll get some actual professionals on who are going to help discuss these topics. And I'm really looking forward to it. But you're the best always, man. You're the greatest. I appreciate you. And until next time,
Likewise, enjoy.
God bless.